I don't hear you. I don't know if everybody hears or not live.
Better.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll use a little microphone today. Okay. So good morning, Coach Within. I'm Michelle Giuliano. I'm delighted to be with Valdone. Natasha's signing in. You can go out to your email inbox in order to find the Zoom link for this call. Today I'm really excited actually because Denise and me and our marketing team, we've been working on a primer program. And as today's conversation today, the topic that I want to introduce is the clear messaging of the talk of Tuesday. We were talking about clear messaging. And so last night I was together with a bunch of teenagers and I wanted to test my ability to do clear messaging about the primer program. And I realized that this community, like many people in Switzerland, was just multinational, multilingual, you know, really talented and bright. But I realized that they didn't understand the word primer, or at least not to my understanding. So I was like, wow, well, that's a condensed message. What's in a word? So I was just thinking about this, what's in a word? And of course I asked them, well, what do you think a primer is? And you see immediately the influence of TikTok. You see immediately the people who are watching the makeup tutorials, well, they're like a makeup primer. It's like a base coat. You put it on first. It prepares your face to receive makeup. And so I just love this process of collecting feedback on clear messaging and clear communications, because whatever I thought was going to be slick got stumped at the word primer program. They understood what a program is. They didn't understand what a primer was. They weren't entirely clear that it was online, and so until it was said. And so I think it's part of my enthusiasm is about how we go about testing and trying our messages. And I'll just give one other example. Recently, this is a horrible example, but I think it merits raising. There are very formal businesses and very, very large formal events where your message has been vetted through legal, it's been tested and tried, you've had a chance to practice at smaller auditoriums and arenas before you then deliver. And recently, somebody that we coach was very let down because somebody they had recommended to a stage had their talk completely vetted, approved, and then ran with a completely different talk than what had been approved. This is, of course, disastrous for careers if you are working in a collaborative environment and if you are the voice for many and you do something like this. And so I was just thinking about how often ego can stand in the way of clear messaging and how important it is to come back to feedback and come back to this concept that really comes out of innovation labs and entrepreneurship to test and try and see how it lands, right? Have the humility to try your message out and get the feedback and have the sensitivity to listen with more than your ears and watch, do people get it? Or do a basic comprehension check. This brings up one last point. What is a comprehension check? I was recently at a workshop and they talked, and it was like returning to the 1980s or early 1990s where you went to a lecture and somebody expert just spoke without ever gauging whether or not the audience was getting it. Are you getting it? Are you with me? Right. So those kinds of basic, you know, just feeling the room, seeing your heads nod, that's bare minimum of comprehension check. But then understanding, asking a qualitative question like, of the 3 topics introduced this morning, which one do you want to run with? That'll give me immediate feedback on what landed. So what do you want to run with on this concept of clear messaging? I was also thinking about interjecting one more topic, which is in the talk on Tuesday, we really talked about when people are using clear messaging and why, because it's not only about branding or logos or visual communications. Like I used the example of the hard hat, you know, color-coded hard hats are often seen at work sites to know who's the boss or who's regarding, you know, who's in charge of security or who's the floor person on a factory floor. But legal situations, protests and campaigns, you know, anything that can fit on a banner and evoke emotion can be really concise, clear messaging. So we had given these 3 top tips actually for part one to know or to gauge when you're authoring your own messages, which is ask yourself, is it clear? Is it simple? Does it evoke an emotion? And you get to determine what emotion you're trying to evoke, because we might want to evoke fear. We might want to evoke disgust. We might want to evoke not necessarily pleasant emotions in order to carry on with part 2 and 3 of our message to transition that to hope or faith or clean right living or whatever is your message. And then my father's company, he has a model that I think works really well and allows especially organizations and people who are really thinking with a vision to simplify complex messaging. When you're delivering even a short message, what do you want people to think? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? My do is very clear. I just want to have a great conversation with everybody. I do want people to view the talk on Tuesdays in order to kind of come along with us and make comments and engage and to share about when and how and why they're using clear messaging. What I want them to think right now that I'm enthusiastic and to feel excited to be present together. So Valdone, did you want to pick up one of these themes?
Yes, it's a very, very important theme, in fact. Clear messaging and active listening, they are so interconnected. I think they have to go, like left and foot and right foot when we walk. Because we might send the message that we find clear. Well, it happened to me this week. I was writing a text, and for me, it seemed so clear, everything, the bullets, and option 1, option 2. And I was sending to another person, and she said, I didn't understand anything. I was like, what? How come? So, well, it's exaggerated, not anything, but it's like, I'm confused. I'm not sure what I should do next. And so, because there was no clear message at the end, what is the action? What should be done? And I was really realizing, and it was really coming to me, this clear messaging, how important it is to really express yourself, also like to send the ball to the next person in the right manner. And then comes the active listening to what the other person says back to you after you send your message, which was probably not very clear. And then you listen what they have to say, and then to adapt and make some changes and give more information or try to give it differently so that they can accept, perceive, and get the emotion or action. Well, emotion is E and motion, so to get them into the motion. So I really tested that this week, and it's really nice because I found it as a lesson. Well, it's I really loved that. It's I think it's very important to acknowledge that, yeah, we don't think the same way, and it's not the generation gap that is even bigger. That we really need to adapt the language and everything. So we also have to think about the person we send the message and stand in their shoes a little, so that they could get a chance to get the message really the way we would love them to get, and to really create this emotion that we would like to get.
Yeah, super. Well, that's a powerful example. I would look forward to hearing how you cross the chasm later, but I want to invite Natasha into the conversation to see which part you picked up on from this opening.
Well, I think we have spoken about that in different talks before. In fact, there are almost 8 billion people on the planet, and we have 8 billion way of thinking. So for me, that's very clear. And it is very important to, when you want to say something, to check, as you were saying, via feedback, via asking question or rephrasing. I mean, sometimes you can see on people's face if you are telling them that they really don't understand what you're saying, so you choose your words and you change. But I think maybe it's more efficient to do it that way, or if in writing, than trying to adapt from the root, because in fact we never know what people think, and we might think we know people, but most of the time we don't, and then something happens and they react completely differently from what we thought they would. And our own personal logic is very different from other. I have an example which is not for me, but from my sister. My sister always used to say, c'est logique, c'est logique, c'est logique. And one day she went to a job interview and she had those tests, you know, when you have all those series and you have that. And honestly, she had 0 everywhere. So she said, I can't say c'est logique anymore because I am not logical at all.
That's super hard feedback to get in that way, in that context, for sure. But better earlier than later.
I know that for me, it's very clear and very obvious. And then I can see straight away, you know, I have learned that with age, that's one of the advantages of getting old, is that if I am in a meeting with different people and there's something coming up and I see very quickly what needs to be done. And before I used to jump and say, oh, we just have to do that. And people look at me. People need the time to go through the stages and get, you know, the process. If you have the solution straight away and you just say, people who haven't had time to go through the process, they will reject the idea, and then maybe 2 hours later they will come back. But it's fun. The pace is also very important. Not just you know what you're saying, but how it sinks in. And some things take time to be understood. En fait,
Natasha, I think this last comment that you made is super leadership oriented. I think excellence in leadership, you just modeled, and let me tell a short story about it so that it's evoked a little better. I was working with a really powerful speaker who had graced the largest stages in America, and we had invited this man to attend an event where we were coaching over 100 Olympic and professional and youth sports coaches at the IOC, Denise and I. And so this event had not just him, but we had 13 top speakers and we were working with them. And day 1, they got to speak and I had done some speaker coaching. Day 2, they were workshop leaders. So we were keeping these extraordinary coaches for 2 days at this event to really hold hearts and minds, which, you know, famous people, that's already a miracle to keep them for 2 days at your local event in Lausanne. But on day 2, I pulled him aside and I was able to have this, I think it was a very memorable for me, and he was so pleased with the results, but it was an intervention because he knows how powerful he can be in terms of influencing others. But when we use our words and our presence and our power and the force of our personality and all those things that he had in spades, you can only get so far. Right? When you pivot the entire thing from a speaker's forum to a workshop forum, and you're inviting and eliciting and including and allowing and evoking the audience participation, right? He's surrounded by other extraordinary thinking coaches, right? They're all Olympic and professional athletes and coaches. So, you know, when you're in that forum of your peers, then to spin the tables and assume and trust, it takes so much faith for somebody who's never done that before, as this individual had never done it before, but to spin those tables and let them come forward and let them carry it. Yes, you may, as a genius, and Natasha, I think you have genius, you know, you may be somebody who is able to get the problem solved 95 to 99% of the way. But if you leave your team behind at 70%, then you don't have any juice, you don't have any power, you don't have any scalability. But if you can elicit and evoke, you might get the whole team up to 85% there, maybe 90% there, not as far as you would have gone had you run the whole thing. But the point is, you can't run the whole thing. right? We've got to pull people in. And so that pacing comment that you just made, I think is really powerful, because when we can invite that participation, when we can bring people with us, then we've really moved. Then we've really got something going for us.
And then
they can tell the story.
And they're more inclined to
engage,
to engage, and to the solution they will find even greater if they participated.
They're invested. Exactly. They're invested. They've put their time and thought and energy in it. So I think it's, I want to come back to Valdone and ask, how did you cross the chasm? Because there's only a few ways in which we do, right? When we run up against that wall and we think, I didn't nail it this first time. So you can get into conversation. You can, what did you do? What happened in terms of clearing or finding clarity? What did you do?
So I asked the questions, which part was not clear? What questions come when you read that? It's and then the person replied, and we could clarify. So I think it's, well, I'm lucky that the person replied saying I didn't understand, because in many cases, many people, they don't understand and just they let it. Well, it was important. Well, I would have come back to the person and asked, but also like in business, and so sometimes when we send a message and people don't reply, we have to think twice. Was it because it was not clear? And many people don't ask questions because you have to have a really high self-esteem to say, well, I didn't understand. And there are not so many people who are brave enough, we can say that, to say, well, I didn't understand. So I think it's, both ways. If there is a silence on the other side, it's good to go back and say, well, is everything clear? Do you have questions? How do we proceed? And so on, whatever is the situation. Or if the person comes back, then of course it's a very good chance to solve everything, because then you have this, clear messaging and active listening all combined, and then for sure everything will be solved. So I think there are two ways to approach: is to sit and wait, and when there is a silence, is not good.
Well, so you followed up and you sought feedback. This is what I've heard anyway. And you conversed again and clarified and made sure there was some more understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah, Natasha, in your world, so I had designed a product once before. I was in business with Denise. Boulder Kids is the brand, and we won some awards, and I had drawn it. I couldn't sew. I had taped it together. I'd cut all the pieces, and I found this Latvian partner who they did all of the Gore-Tex and all of my favorite outdoor brands. They were the manufacturing partner for them, and they're Blue Sign approved, so they're eco-ethical. And so I find this extraordinary factory partner. And I do this communication, which includes the specs, the drawings. It's for a harnessed carried baby. So I just assumed that, they understood that this is in a harness. I drew it, right? It's got arches and curves. So there's a cylindrical form. And I get the first prototypes back, and it has shoulders in it, literal shoulders in it. And I'm like, where did you see shoulders? There's nothing square, right? I drew it. It's presented. I showed it's a baby and a thing, and so I paid for those samples, right? I paid extraordinarily for those samples, that had shoulders in it when for me, it was crystal clear. So I think there's one other thing that didn't come up in this talk as I bring about this example, and I'm curious to know if you think where it lands for you. Because so on this call, I'm telling a couple of stories I'm noticing, and telling an impactful story is of course, one of the ways to clear up communications and to be remembered, to be memorable. But what I ended up having to do was fly, right? I needed proximity. I needed to get there. I needed to show them. I had sent them paper full size, cut it exactly like this, and they couldn't figure it out. So I needed to understand where the breakdown in communication was. I needed to see the machines they were working with. I needed to understand that if they're always making jackets, of course, they might assume that there are shoulders in here, and they couldn't understand a baby this size instead of, So I meet these people, they're brilliant, they're just amazing. And in the end, that effort to fly also put me in another category of eco-ethical, in that they were able to convince me, oh yes, go ahead with your other two designs, because in the same square meterage of material, we'll be able to cut those other two products and have less waste. So I had 94 to 97% usage on my material, which is unheard of in the textile industry. It's more like 74 to 82 at the best. So I was up to 94% because I had all these small pieces to cut. And that would not have been possible had I didn't close the gap and come and be physical and press the flesh and go out for lunch and make sure people understood and could see. So there's also some point to proximity. I wonder if you have a connection to this point about clearing communications with your presence.
Yes, for sure, 100%. When it's a very important talk, even in this modern age, post-COVID Zoom age, we really see the difference when it's in person, a meeting and discussion, and really like feeling the other person, because we can, we can see like 1/3 of the body on screen, right? So the body language is not full. And when we are close, we can really see and feel the person, and sometimes, from small move, you see, oh, I think she or he didn't get right. So it's for sure 100%, and it was really a good move that you did to go there in this factory, be there, and then show with a finger and draw in front of their eyes. So for sure.
And also my important love and their love for the project grew too, right? Because our hearts came together, and I saw that mature daughters of mature mothers worked in this factory, meaning they kept staff, they kept people, they housed them, they had doctoring services and childcare services. So I grew in love with the factory, and they grew in love with the project and and what I was trying to create and innovate. And I think that was, talk about emotions, right? Talk about capturing emotions, and an unforgettable trip and an unforgettable award-winning product, at the end of it, because everybody got involved, and we got that cleared up, and we didn't let it take months of stewing. I mean, I was on a plane in a week. I was like, no, this can't work. Yeah, you're my, and not, no, this can't work. Let me change factories. No, this can't work. And I need you. Let's make this work. Cool. Natasha, something to add?
I think definitely whatever has been said, with all the mess we've been through, being together and working together face to face, body to body, makes a huge difference. I also think that you were saying, Michelle, I thought blah blah blah. So these phrases that we tell ourselves, we have to eliminate. We have to verify. Yeah. I thought, I believe. I can't think of any others, but assuming for other people is always, any situation. It doesn't have to be business. I go back to my sister once again. She's very present today. When my sister got married, so my sister is half French and half English like me, and she got married to a Moroccan man who used to live in France, but when they lived in Bangladesh with my mother, and they got married, and I learned it, like a month later, and I said, well, why didn't you tell me? She said, oh, I thought you wouldn't come, it's too far away. I said, what?
Wow.
Because all those things, I thought, I believe, I assume, are controlling. Yeah. When you say that, you think you have the power. And in fact, we never know.
Or you're controlling it, to protect yourself, right? You're setting up a boundary. It's not necessarily at least she can't disappoint me.
But exactly. But in fact, we never know what's in other people's head.
In English, we have a spelling example of the word assume, ASSUME. That when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
Mais c'est vrai.
So that's a good one. Because the day before yesterday, I was listening to one course, and it was about assume, and it was totally the opposite. Saying, well, we have to assume and believe in things even if we don't have the proof. So it's it's good to find the right, the harmony in the assume also. Either we assume and it's done and we don't move anymore, or we assume some things that are on us, especially when it's
assuming responsibility.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like assuming a responsibility.
But just for us.
Yes.
For
Not
others,
assume for the others, but assume for us, then it's the right way. Because then we take the power you talked about. When we take the power on us and we control us, and then we assume, then it's the right way. But when we try to control the others and assume for the others, it's the wrong way.
That's what religions do.
Yes.
Happy.
Yes.
I don't know with the translation of that saying that, but is it happy the one who believes without seeing? Heureux celui qui croit sans voir. That's religion.
That's a good example, because we have to believe. For example, when we believe in ourselves that we can do it, yes, I can do it. Of course, we don't see the result yet, and we have to believe in it without seeing.
I think you're speaking about two things, right? Because one thing is to have this visionary sight that requires a faith as you cross the chasm to the vision that you see, right? When you have an elite performing, a 17-year-old mini champion going to the next level, and they say, I want to be an Olympic athlete, and they're on time, right? They're doing the right thing. They're on the path. Then I endorse that belief and that faith and seeing themselves on the podium, because it helps them put their gear on every day to go out and do what's necessary to get there. So that crossing the chasm faith, or that manifestation and that belief, I think is quite different than dogma, which I think is what Natasha was talking about, and this religious dogma, which says, actually don't think, don't challenge, don't learn, don't grow. And I'm not saying that all religions do this, or that all, or that, anyway, nothing about people's faith, but I believe in informed faith, and I believe that we're here in this community because we care about growth, and your faith should be able to withstand your challenges and your questions and your curiosity and your inclusive ideals and ideas. And so at least this is part of my faith, right? My faith is about not being right, but getting it right and doing right and being the most right that I know how to be in my self-expression, or to show up as my best self. And that requires inclusion, and that requires getting it wrong. That requires falling on my face sometimes and having some humility. Cool. Last comments, or actually, I wanted to give the last minute to your adjectives, your message, because you guys are on this call regularly. And so I assume that people who tune in, they have an impression about you and your messages and your goals. But in this talk, we had asked people about personal messaging and doing a personal message audit on yourself. So eliciting that feedback of, do people know what you stand for, what your values are, what your messages are? Do they know what you stand for? I think Denise and I both had the chance to give a TEDx talk. So we have some messages out there in terms of the ideas worth sharing, but they're not necessarily core values only. So do you have some adjectives or some core messages that if you were, God forbid, to die today, do you think you are known for those messages right now, or for those ideals? And what are they?
Well, I mean, to my my tiny scale, I think so. People know, well, I know Valdone, we live in the same town, but people know that I am very committed, that I try to put women forward with all my, whatever it is, photographic, postcard, podcast, article writing. I am ferocious with the idea of defending that cause. and I'm very involved in linking people. I think link is probably my favorite word. And I think it's also because of life experience, but that it's the only thing that matters in life is how you have been with people.
Beautiful, beautiful. Those are great messages. Valdone, do you want to share yours?
Yes. I think, well, many people, last week I had a birthday, so I have some balloons hanging, and I had many messages and it was very nice to read, well, the ones who said more than happy birthday, that many said, well, it's so good to have your light, your smile, and your optimism. Even when the things are not very easy, you find the way to go through with a smile. And thank you for your support. You are always there when we need. And it was not, well, it's not my words how I describe, it's just the words that I was reading in many messages. And it was really touching me. And I think it was describing quite well, because I like to help people, to listen to them, to try them to help them to find the solutions themselves, not to say what they have to do. And
Beautiful.
Also, of course, I'm the fan of the nature, and that's also a big part of me. And I try to always share what I see and what I feel when I'm in the nature.
Beautiful. Well, it comes through. Thank you so much for sharing your messages and for spreading the light and for being on the coffee call. And I wish you just a gorgeous, gorgeous weekend and love, lots of love.
Yes, you too.
And clear messaging.
Clear message.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
week. Bye.
Bye-bye.